is an inside job. It is something we cultivate within us, and it is a daily practice. So as I was thinking about how to share Buddha's middle pathway, the original idea was to get Master Tran here for our Interfaith series, and that didn't work out. And so I was like, well, Buddhism is a part of this interfaith pathway. I'm going to try to share some of what I know with you here. And as I was thinking about how to do this, these quotes came to mind. Because when we understand something important about spiritual pathways, no matter what religion they are, no matter what, how they might feel separated in our daily lives, spiritual truth transcends all of those. Spiritual truth transcends each individual pathway because spiritual truth is always true. And so something that all of these pathways share, Buddhism, Christianity, unity, is the idea of true freedom. True freedom is at the level of our minds. It's at the level of our thoughts. True freedom is cultivated by our daily spiritual practice. How many of you have a daily spiritual practice? How many of you have a weekly spiritual practice? For those who aren't raising your hand, maybe you have at least a monthly spiritual practice. You're here today, though, so that's part of your spiritual practice. True spiritual freedom comes through our consciousness and through our conscious choice. Now, when Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore started Unity, started sharing what they had learned from their pathway, along with other New Thought leaders of the late 1800s, when they taught this spiritual truth that there is a power in the mind, there is a transformative power of the mind, this wasn't a new idea. Yes, it's called New Thought, but it's not a new idea. This is something for us to kind of think about for just a moment. It was new, certainly, I'm sure, to Myrtle and Charles when they first learned about it. And we might think about, where were we when we first learned about the transformation and the power of the mind to be able to transform our lives? For me, it happened after I was having anxiety attacks in my 20s. And I ended up going and seeing a therapist, and I was introduced to not just meditation that I had kind of experienced in my younger years, but mindfulness-based meditation, meditation that was designed to create peace within the heart and the mind. And that transformed my consciousness. It brought me into the pathway of Buddhism and wanting to learn more about Buddhism. Where does this mindfulness come from? And then when I entered Unity, looking for some place where I could practice, I said, there's parallels here. There is something about going within that they recognize in their pathway that I want to partake in and find out more. So it wasn't new to Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Maybe it was new to you some point in your life, but this isn't a new idea. Centuries, 18 centuries before Charles and Myrtle Fillmore taught this truth, who taught this truth? Jesus taught this truth, that the kingdom of God is within, right? The transformative power of the mind. 5 centuries before Jesus, Buddha also taught this truth. Now, in just a couple of weeks, we will be exploring the Gospel of Thomas, which really talks about this truth, the kingdom of God within. It talks about this idea of making the outside like the inside, that there's really neither male nor female, that there's just this kind of oneness that one gets when one goes within. But today I want to talk a little bit more about Buddhism and about how Buddha imagined this pathway 5 centuries before Jesus taught his followers. And so I want to start with the opening lines of the Dhammapada. I know I've shared this before with you. The Dhammapada is one of the main Buddhist texts. It's thought to actually be attributed to the oral tradition of the teachings of Buddha that was passed down by his followers. And the words still resonate with us today. Right? All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind, speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind, speak or act with a peaceful mind, and happiness follows like a never departing shadow. I want to talk about the visual imagery here. What does it feel like when you're carrying negativity, when you're carrying resentment, when you're carrying jealousy or greed, when you're carrying all these things of wishing maybe ill on another or thinking ill of yourself? What does that feel like? Does it feel weighted? Does it feel like you struggle? Can you imagine all the stuff that you have on your cart that you as the oxen are pulling? What am I as an individual carrying? That's what this verse is inviting us to explore. What am I carrying? What negativity? What limitations am I thinking of in my thoughts that I'm carrying out into the way I act and speak in the world? How is that creating my reality? What happens, though, when we let go of that cart? What does it feel like when you're coming from a place of love and kindness and compassion and that Christ consciousness? Does it feel like you're carrying something? No. It feels as lightweight as a child playing with their shadow. It is as natural as that. This is the visual imagery that Buddha brought to bear on the idea that our minds create our experience. That letting go of all that negativity, letting go of all the stuff that we carry, all the stuff we cling to in our human experience, all the stuff that our ego mind wants to like shame or blame or, harm or what have you. When we're carrying that, it's weighted, and when we let it go, it is so freeing. It is so freeing. But this, like I said, isn't a new teaching. Unity's third principle is practically just a summary of what the Dhammapada opens with. Unity's third principle tells us human beings create their experience by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. Another way to understand this, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Now we know this on the level of neuroplasticity. We know this on the level of our brains because yes, neurons that fire together have a tendency to wire together. And the more that we feed negativity and those kinds of thoughts into our brain, the more neural connections we're going to make for that. And the more that we feed spiritual truth and love and kindness into our brains, into that pathway, into the ways we're thinking, the more we are going to make connections for that. We know this. Science has proven this. This is not just spiritual truth, it's biological truth at the level of our bodies. The spiritual truth behind Unity's third teaching principle, behind the opening verses of the Dhammapada, behind that is the foundation of Buddha's pathway, it's all pointing to the same thing. It's all pointing to this law of mind action. Jesus said it best when he says, you reap what you sow. Well, what is it that we're sowing in our consciousness? What is it that we're sowing in our thoughts? Because that is what we're going to reap. So today I want to talk a little bit more about the historical Buddha. He went by the name Siddhartha Gautama. And some of the Buddhist teachings, really a lot of them, point to this transformative power of the mind. If you understand that as the fundamental, then when you get to in-depth teachings, which I can't get to today, like no self, it's not surprising, because it's really, there isn't an inherent Melissa that I can point to in this lifetime and say, that is the quintessential Melissa, because I am beyond that. I have experience that is not just greater than that, but I am oneness with it. I am oneness with Dharma, with law, with God, with principle, whatever you want to call that universal teaching. So there's nothing inherently that is Melissa, right? And so when you understand that it begins in the mind, then these kinds of teachings are like, wow, where did this come from? Well, for those who are unfamiliar with the Buddhist pathway or with the lifetime of the Buddha, I'm going to start with saying that he, like Jesus, like Charles and Myrtle, recognized that it was an inside job. That ultimately he came to the understanding, I have to go within to make the change that I want to see. He was a historical figure. He was a spiritual revolutionary who lived around the 6th century BCE, so give or take 500 years before Jesus. He was born of nobility. He had a life of privilege. It's said, he spent most of his time in the palace, so much so that he didn't understand the suffering of the world. And when he actually went outside the palace walls and looked at the suffering of the world, he was shocked by what he saw, because he saw pain and illness and old age and death. And so he said, life is suffering. Now, some people take this idea that life is suffering to mean that life is all suffering, a very nihilistic way of looking at the world. I think there are people that we know, maybe in our lives, that hold the glass half full kind of thought and mentality. And when you hear there's suffering in the human experience, you might think that Buddha is teaching that that's all there is. Well, we know that's not the truth. How many of you have been happy today at some point? Right? So we know suffering is not all it is. What he is teaching is that there's suffering in the human experience and that there is a way, a spiritual pathway out of that suffering. So at age 29, even though he was married, even though he had just had a newborn child, it said that he cut his hair, that he left his clothes, he took up kind of the robes of the ascetic, and he went out to discover the spiritual pathway that would lead to the end of suffering. Now, if this kind of resonates, it might be because we know another itinerant teacher, Jesus, who did something very similar, where he went place to place. He took people up, you can imagine, he told his followers, like, get rid of your possessions, follow me, right? So this idea that leaving some of that worldliness behind. And that's what the Buddha did. He left the worldliness behind. We might think, well, it was just an easy thing. He just obtained enlightenment after that, right? He just sat and meditated. Well, he spent 6 years following 2 different teachers, learning how to master their meditation techniques, going into extreme asceticism, where he gave up all food except it said like a single grain of rice each day and a little sip of like fluid, right? We can imagine how skinny he might have been at the end of this asceticism, right? And he discovered this is not the pathway. The pathway isn't a life of just luxury, but it's also not a life of extreme giving up of everything. It is a middle pathway, a pathway of balance. And so after he spent some time with his companions, his spiritual companions, he decided to give up that asceticism and start taking in nourishment. And he started thinking about, how can I achieve enlightenment? What am I missing? And he thought back to a time where he was a child and he sat under a tree and he just meditated. And it came so naturally to him, where he just contemplated. And he said, I'm going to try that again. And so he was so determined. He said, I'm going to sit here under this tree until I gain enlightenment. Now it's said that he spent 49 days under that tree. Think about that, 49 days. Parallels Jesus' journey in many ways, if you think about it. Right? We're familiar with the 40 days in the wilderness, the praying, the fasting, the temptations that Jesus overcame. Well, Buddha's story is said to have not only paralleled Jesus, but took place before Jesus's. What does 49 represent? In the Buddhist tradition, 49 is generally the time period between when someone dies and when someone is reincarnated. His time under the tree, he was reborn. He was completely transformed. We can look at this as having that metaphysical meaning of meditation. That inward pathway transforms us. It makes us anew. So when Jesus later talks about being reborn, that's really what you're talking about, being transformed by the mind. Being reborn to a spiritual understanding. So what happened on Buddha's pathway? Well, in that 49 days, it said that while he was meditating under the Bodhi tree, that he was tempted by a deity, some say demon-like figure, called Mara, and Mara's 3 daughters. Now, we might be tempted to view Mara like traditional Christianity views the devil or Satan and see it as a physical entity, but I'm going to invite you not to do that here today. I'm going to invite you to see it as a kind of personification of the egoic aspects of the mind. A personification of what happens in consciousness. It is really, just as the oxen and the shadow is a metaphor, it's a metaphor for that inner work that we do in consciousness. Now, Mara's 3 daughters represented desire, aversion, and passion. While Mara generally represents all those things held in error in mind that prevents spiritual awakening and spiritual understanding. What are those things in your life? What are you carrying around in your oxen cart that's weighing you down? That is the personification of Mara. Now, Mara literally means death, or death bringer, or the bringer of death. And so for Buddha to overcome the temptations of Mara, he's saying, no, my consciousness isn't dying to the human experience today. My consciousness is reborn to spiritual awakening and understanding. It doesn't mean that the human experience stopped. The Buddha still recognized that there was going to be pain in the body, that there was sometimes going to be pain in the heart, that there was sometimes going to be pain in the mind in the human experience, but he stopped clinging to it. He stopped shooting that second arrow into himself with pain and suffering. And how many of us shoot not just the second arrow, but a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, I can go on and on and on. How many of you shoot that arrow into yourself? Blame, shame, guilt, frustration, hostility, anger, fear. the Buddha overcame. He overcame in that 49 days all the temptations of Mara. And it said that after his enlightenment, he had a choice. I can keep this teaching to myself and go and have a nice alone life in which I know what's mine to know, or I can teach it to others. He ended up teaching it to others, and that's how it was passed down. But it's also said in Buddhist teachings that even the Buddha recognized that when someone said, "Is this pathway the right pathway?" he wouldn't really give an answer. You have to experience it for yourself. It is an inner experience. Our brains, each single one of us here today, our brains are individual down to our neural connections. We are a combination of our own experiences through our lifetime and our own genetics. And there are no two brains at the neural level that are ever going to look exactly the same. So that pathway for you is going to be different than that pathway for me. We can use the same techniques, but it's inner work. There are inner things in your cart, in your oxen cart that you are carrying around that I might not be carrying around, and there are things I'm carrying around that you're probably not carrying around. And it's as individual to us as it was to Buddha. So as we begin to start to prepare for meditation today, I just want to share some words with you, because the Buddha's life is really a template. Just as Jesus' life is a kind of template, it's pointing to spiritual truth. It's pointing to something outside of themselves that they knew to be spiritual truth. We don't have to follow in the exact footsteps of Buddha or Jesus to uncover spiritual truth in our lives. Our footsteps are our own. They are merely pointing towards the truth. So as we lean into meditation, I'm going to share just a couple more verses from Buddhist scripture with you here today. And this is one of the illustrations of what it looked like for Buddha to face off with Mara and his army of demons. I want to share with you a verse from the Lankavatara Sutra. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but I did not take Sanskrit. I did take a couple Buddhist classes in college, but I did not take Sanskrit. Eliminate the discriminating mind so that all that remains is the universal mind. That could be a unity quote, right? When Charles and Myrtle Fillmore talk about the silence, this could be that quote. Eliminate the discriminating mind so that all that remains is universal mind. And it goes on to say, in order to eliminate the discriminating mind, there must be a complete turning around of one's being at the deepest level of consciousness. One has to be born anew. This takes place in the mind. The Dhammapada, verse 24, says, with earnest meditation, purity of mind, and compassionate acts of kindness, you will become an island of serenity which even the greatest floods cannot sweep away. How many of you have experienced that island of serenity in prayer and meditation? We know the pathway. The question is, are we willing to practice it daily? And verse 348 of the Dhammapada says, to reach the farthest shore, let go of all things. When your mind is free, you will travel beyond life and death. It really is about experiencing the oneness that connects each of us. So I'm going to invite us into meditation now. I'm going to invite you to start to get comfortable in your chairs here this morning, to just allow yourself to start to relax. If you're feeling any tension in your body, I'm going to invite you just to maybe tense up those muscles a little bit more and relax them so you know what full relaxation feels like. If you've never done that as a meditation practice, you can go through all the centers of your body, starting with your head down to your toes, and tense up different areas of your body and just relax it so that you know what full relaxation feels like. Once you are starting to get relaxed, I invite you to put your hands gently on your lap or by your side, whatever feels comfortable for you today. And as we breathe in and focus on the breath, I'm going to invite a little Buddhist meditation practice here today. So I'm going to invite you to breathe in peace. And breathe out anything that is not bringing you peace. To feel peace come in through the nose, to expand in your breath, to expand in your body. And just allow any negativity that you might be holding, any tension, to just fall out on the out breath. Breathe in peace and breathe out negativity. In the Buddhist practice, it is just to breathe. Very similar to what Charles and Myrtle talked about as the silence. Breathing in peace, breathing out negativity. Beginning with this state of relaxation, of the body's relaxed alertness. As you are both relaxed and alert in this consciousness right now. Allow yourself to focus on this breath. And nothing but the breath in this moment. And if thoughts arise, watch them float on by like clouds passing, or like a leaf on a stream. Oh, I had a thought right now. And now I return to the breath. And focusing on the breath, we hone our concentration, our ability to hold this sacred silence, this sacred moment. During your meditation, you may find that you go into a period where time seems to stand still. Where there is a deep and profound silence. And if so, I invite you to welcome that. Some of you may only be able to focus on the breath as you start this practice of meditation, and that's okay too. If your mind starts to wander as you breathe, just bring yourself back to concentrating on the breath, breathing in peace, breathing out all else that is on your mind. Breathing in peace and knowing that peaceful state right here, right now, as we enter the silence. breathing in peace. Breathing out any other thoughts that come to mind. Not clinging, not pushing away, just being in this state of conscious awareness. Choosing the peace. Choosing the stillness. Choosing the connection to spiritual truth. This is a choice that we can make any day, any time, as we cultivate our own inner freedom. Inner freedom is not given to us. Rather, we have the power to transform our thoughts and to choose what to focus on in our lives. To choose what neural connections we want to foster in alignment with spiritual truth. I invite you to breathe in one more time of that peace, knowing that peace here and now, knowing that this is a part of who you are, and it's always available to you. As you bring back gentle awareness to your body, I invite you to do so ever so gently. Maybe you wiggle fingers and toes. Maybe you gently roll your shoulders one direction and then back the other. Maybe you ever so gently stretch your neck. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes. Buddha's life is a kind of template for our spiritual unfoldment. After months and years of searching for spiritual truth, he discovered the answer within himself, with the inner pathway within, challenging what he was holding in mind, letting go of any limitations that were holding him back, and moving forward. This pathway brings our own awareness to what we have the potential to achieve. You might call it Buddha nature, you might call it Christ consciousness, you might call it divine spark. That potential that the Buddha achieved, that Jesus achieved in their time here on earth, is a potential all of us is capable of. We simply have to go within and follow the pathway that is ours to follow. I want to thank you for joining me here today as I explored Buddha's middle pathway. And I invite each of you this week to take time to explore your own pathway. Namaste. And if you happen to be interested, I know Frank donated a version of this, Jesus and Buddha, the Parallel Sayings, in hard copy. Wonderful book if you're ever wanting to learn more about the parallel sayings. There's also one by Richard Hooper called Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and Lao Tzu, which is also really good. So thank you again.
Know this by heart by now, but again, thank you, Melissa, for the wonderful talk. And now it will be time to get ready for prayer consciousness. Thank you to all thank you to all who have continued blessing our spiritual community with your tithes and offerings. We are truly blessed by your giving. If you feel led by Spirit to give today, we invite you to prepare your gift now. And if you're being led to make an online donation today, you can use our convenient PayPal QR code or visit our website. We now invite you to hold the thought of your gift in your mind and your heart as we say our offering blessing together. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have and all that I give and all that I receive. And so it is. Amen.
Release the love I am inside, and love returns to feed my life. Give to get from me to you. Love only this I must do. Let go of resentment. Is that my key? That's not the right key. Oh God. What did you do?
That's the right key.
What
we practice.
Is that what we
Let's hear it
practice?
again.
Yeah, that's
Release the love
I am inside, and love returns to feed my life. Give to get from me to you. To love all beings, this I must do. Let go of resentments, prejudices too. Accept the many differences, none I shall exclude. I now commit my life to love. Release the love I am inside, and love returns to feed my life. Give to get from me to you. To love all means, this I must do. Let go of resentments, prejudices too. Accept the many differences, none I shall exclude. I now commit my life to love. Release the love I am inside, and love returns to feed my life. Give to get from me to you. To love all means, this I must do. Release the love.
Full marks for the effort.
What's that?
Full marks for the effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, Unity Singers, and all of you for singing along with us. It went well, right?